The first official Regulation G tournament, better known as Indianapolis Regionals, has come to a shocking finish where we have Maridon winning the event, no Calyrex Shadow in top 8, and I believe that might fall down to top 16 as well. An absolutely wild page of results that we're going to be going over for you guys in today's video, and I think we might as well start right off the bat with Maridon and this championship team here. And I think immediately what crosses my mind is that we need to sign an apology form. Okay? Everybody wrote Maridon off. Everybody said this Pokemon is not it. This Pokemon, yes, it can do a lot of damage, but given the fact that you can just switch the terrain, you can mitigate the damage in that regard, you can switch in a ground type and mitigate the damage. Everybody was writing this Pokemon off, myself included. I wrote this Pokemon off. I said it's strong, it's powerful, but it's not going to see a lot of play because it doesn't really get much and it's pretty easy to shut down. Now, clearly, Rajan just said, no, this Pokemon is disgusting. It needs to be utilized. And whether or not it was actually as strong as it was, which I'm pretty sure it was, we saw this thing on stream time and time again, just absolutely remove Pokemon from the field, which no one ever saw coming before. Like, Amoonguss was scared for its life, and you don't see that too often, right? So the team was absolutely incredible, absolute powerhouse of a team, and you've got that very similar core with the Tailwind Blood Moon, right? That is not a new concept. That is something we've seen in the past. You know, you get that big damage from the Blood Moon, you get the Farigiraf, maybe you get a Trick Room mode if you wanted it to, you get Incineroar on those types of teams as well, and then you throw a Whimsicott on, and you get your Tailwind. Now, generally, back in the day, you'd see a Tornadus here. I think Whimsicott is very, very cool, especially besides something like Maridon, where, you know, you're kind of just blowing things up. You know, you destroy a bunch of things. You don't need to have a Torn. Tornadus felt pretty rough because Raging Bolt would wall Maridon. And by wall Maridon, I mean if you Terra it and, like, you take 60. But, like, besides the point. You know, Torn feels weird here because it would be another piece that wouldn't like Raging Bolt. Whimsicott at least can maybe pressure it back. Having Fairy coverage in this format is genuinely very good, right? And I think Encore is a very cool option, right? It just allows you to play around with your pieces. And basically, if you're going to say, I'm going to protect in front of this Maridon, you better think twice about that. Now, obviously, I do not know all of Rajan's team decisions, but the team is very, very strong. Ogerpon Cornerstone is one of the best redirectors in the game. That is time and time again also being slept on. Similar to that Maridon, right? You have Sturdy. You are able to redirect a guaranteed 2 attacks into your Ogerpon unless it's something along the lines of a multi-hit attack. And that is massive, whether you're trying to set your Trick Room up, whether you're just redirecting and letting the Maridon go crazy for a couple turns, whether you are redirecting and let the Blood Moon go crazy for a couple turns. The team is very, very well built, which is obvious when it wins the regional, but it is absolutely wild. I'm not going to touch upon Electric Seed Farigiraf because I genuinely don't know what that's for. If I had to take a guess, obviously you're just trying to get your defenses boosted, right? You can now lead like Maridon Farigiraf, have a boosted defense, maybe get a Volt Switch out into like a Trick Room Sweeper and get a Trick Room up, something along those lines, and getting that added defense to the Giraffe is, I think, something a lot of people weren't ready for. When I'm doing my damage calcs against Farigiraf, I am not calcing for a +1 defense for Farigiraf, and I think the ability to have that, especially early format, you're going to see a lot of these, like, quote-unquote weird techs, because I don't know any other way to describe it, right? Like, no one's seen Electric Seed Farigiraf before, but it works, right? And when you play in a GS Cup format, and when you play in these high-powered offensive formats, having these small things that can tweak a specific matchup into your favor is insanely strong. And I think that's what you're seeing here with the Giraffe. In terms of what it actually does, though, I am not certain. Then you move on to a little bit more of a team that we were kind of expecting coming into the tournament, and that is Terapagos. I think there was probably a few people saying that, hey, Terapagos could win this event. I wasn't very sold on Terapagos. I do think Terapagos is a little bit linear in how it plays. However, what I do want to say is I think there's room for Terapagos to be played as a non-linear archetype. The base concept is the same, but how you go about approaching and closing out the team can definitely make a difference in how it gets played. It's not as linear as one would think, so I will eat my words on that one. As we do see the Terapagos here, the Choice Specs variant in second place. And Terra Starstorm, Dark Pulse, Sleep Talk. I mean, Terra Starstorm, Sleep Talk, that's nothing crazy. We saw only those two moves on Oliver Eskelin's team in Victory Road a few weeks ago. And now we're just seeing the addition of a Dark Pulse and a Hyper Beam. I'm pretty confident 90% of the time with this Terrapagos, you are clicking Terra Starstorm. I don't see a reason to not click Terra Starstorm 90% of the time. But you know, sometimes it's nice to have those other moves. Dark Pulse obviously pressuring the Lunalas, pressuring the Calyrex Shadows. And of course, Hyper Beam is just basically, it's a delete button, right? This is a delete button. I'm pretty confident in Terra Stellar Terrapagos dropping a Choice Specs Hyper Beam is probably deleting most of the board, right? And that's your single target move after you've Terra'd to just become that delete button. And I think that's a very cool option that a lot of Terrapagos players haven't caught onto yet. You know, you get to Terra, or you would get the Terra Starstorm when you weren't Terra'd as your single target, and then when you Terra'd, you get your spread move. But having another spread move, or having another single target move after you Terra, can still put on immense amounts of pressure, right? And then you're pairing this with the likes of Safety Goggles Urshifu, which is a very cool tech, knowing that Incineroar Amoonguss, that is one of the best defensive cores in the game right now. And Safety Goggles Urshifu Water absolutely destroys both of those. You pair that with the Tailwind into Torn. Torn Urshifu, nothing new, guys, nothing to talk about there. Flutter TU, that is also not new. The Choice Scarf TU, though, is a really cool touch on the team, right? You get to go that fast Snarl, just mitigate some of that pressure that Calyrex is emitting onto your board, which is incredible. You also have access to like the Fluttermane, the Icy Wind. You slow things down for the Terrapagos, for the Urshifu. The speed control on this team, and then you still have the defensive backbone of just throwing an Amoonguss on a team, is crazy. Terrapagos is bulky enough on its own without a lot of bulk investment. And the team feels really, really strong, looks really, really strong as well. Obviously, it did well at the regional, so obviously it's a strong team. But I think some of the techs on this team are what made this team go. Because, like I said at the beginning of the Terrapagos talk here, we all kind of expected Terrapagos to be that linear game plan. You know, you'd walk in, you'd cycle around a little bit, you'd try to get a calm mind up. And that was very linear. Now, obviously, we saw some of the specs Terrapagos picking up in usage, but I don't think we ever saw it to this capability, where now you got Specs Terrapagos beside a Scarf TU, you've got Tailwind, you've got the Urshifu, right? You've got a lot of pressure being hit onto the board immediately, and a lot of plans into Terrapagos where, well, Terrapagos is going to slowly build up to that spot. But if you're going to be immediately getting steamrolled by Terrapagos, I think a lot of teams weren't ready for that, and I think it showed in Andrew's run. Now we're getting into the third place to fourth place teams. These are actually the teams I think a lot of us were expecting to perform well in the tournament, right? You know, those bulky, those Calyrex Ice, those Ice Rider teams, those Shadow Rider teams. Just the bulkier, a little bit more balance oriented. Get that Trick Room up, get that Glacial Lance going crazy, right? And these are both what you expected coming into this. I'm not going to spend too much time, right? We've seen Pelipper, Calyrex Ice picking up in usage. The Raging Bolt is a very cool touch on this team. I believe the VR winning team was very similar, only I believe it had Golden go over Raging Bolt. Regardless, team is very, very strong. There's not a lot of anything crazy, right? Like the Incin, the Calyrex, the Amoonguss, the Pelipper, right? Paired out with the Urshifu. Like these five, they're common, right? But they're common for a reason and they're strong. And Justin piloted this very, very well, getting a top four in the tournament. It was third, but you know what I mean. Top four in the tournament. I think the Raging Bolt is a very nice touch on this team. I think it adds that element of just that special pressure on the offense, right? Obviously, whether it's the Goldengo or the Raging Bolt, both technically apply the same thing. Raging Bolt is a little bit better in the Trick Room. Pair with that Calyrex. Raging Bolt's scared of ground types. Calyrex removes the ground types. It makes sense to me. And then Thunderclap for priority is always a nice option. And honestly, Booster Energy is a kind of a breath of fresh air. No Assault Vest on the team either, which with Assault Vest being my favorite item, I'm always like, you know, where's the Assault Vest? Especially in a format where you've got stuff like Kyogre and Calyrex Shadow, right, being main attackers, right? So not having an Assault Vest is, in my opinion, a little weird. But honestly, the Booster Energy just swings damage calcs where you normally just expect something to live a Raging Bolt attack. It can no longer live that attack from the Raging Bolt. And that is a massive, could swing momentum into your favor. I think it's a cool team. Obviously, a little bit more standard. Same with Leonard's team here. Just pretty much exactly these two were kind of exactly what we were expecting going into the tournament. You know, those bulky, those balanced teams that just are able to get that Shuriken Rope when they need to and able to just spam that, take abuse of that Glacial Lance with the Clear Amulet. It is absolutely disgusting, right? And very similar builds as well. Obviously, some cool text here. Like you've got the Uproar and the Giraffe, right? You've got the Volt Switch on Raging Bolt for positioning. And then, of course, the Amoonguss is just going to be an Amoonguss, right? Clear Smog is always nice. Coaching on the Urshifu is actually really, really cool. So I guess you can lead like Urshifu Calyrex and then just like coach yourself to get the +1 immediately, which is pretty cool. Getting that defense boost is never a bad thing either. Maybe that's cool in the mirror as well, right? Because then like you can just coach things and get a defense boost and then all of a sudden win the mirror matchup because you've got a defense boost. So that's kind of cool, right? And then back again now, Nick Navarre's team. Once again, I believe this is another Specs Terapagos. So just once again, Specs Terapagos proving to be quote-unquote the better Terapagos right now. And it's a very similar concept that, you know, I guess a lot of people were either hiding because I hadn't seen a lot of this before Indianapolis, right? But, you know, you get that massive Tailwind option. You've got the Chi-Yu beside the Terapagos for even more pressure. You've got the Urshifu there as well, obviously, right? Like, we all know Torn Ursh is good. There's no surprise there, right? And it's a very strong option. And then, once again, their really only defensive piece is that you throw the Amoonguss on. Obviously, AV Raging Bolt, very, very bulky as well. But overall, I mean, the really only true defensive piece is that Amoonguss. And other than that, it's just, I'm going to send this piece. And like I said, with the Terapagos teams, it's, everybody was kind of, I think, coming into the tournament, their game plans versus Terapagos were, it's going to be a slow build-up to get to that Terapagos setup. If I can stop that Terapagos setup, I'm fine. All of a sudden, Terapagos starts putting out Specs damage beside Chi-Yu, and your team is absolutely blown up in like 4 turns, and you have no clue what's happening anymore, right? So I think that messes with a lot of people's game plans that were built for Terapagos, and that slower version of Terapagos. And obviously it worked, because you see it in 2nd and in 5th place here. Now we've got the first Kyogre team, and Kyogre Iron Jugulus. This is something I personally tested out as well. I do have a team report on my variant of the team. Obviously, my variant was nowhere close to as good as this variant. And this team is very, very cool, right? You've got Snarl, Hurricane on the Jugulus beside the Kyogre. You get those fast Tailwinds up with pressure. You get the pressure down the Calyrex Shadows, those big special tackles with the Snarl. And then you just have a Kyogre. And I really, really like Assault Vest Kyogre. I was actually sold that Assault Vest Kyogre wasn't going to be good until a double restricted format, because it just felt like you're throwing an Assault Vest on your restricted when you could have your Assault Vest somewhere else on the team and then capitalize on restricted a little more. However, Assault Vest Kyogre is very, very difficult to remove from the field, right? Now you pair this with a Snarl. Any special attacking core is going to struggle to remove this Kyogre, right? Then you pair the AV Kyogre with the Incin and the Serena, so you're intimidating those Rillabooms. You're stopping the Grassy Glides from those Rillabooms, right? You have the ability to put on an immense amount of pressure still with Water Spout, with Origin Pulse. And I think the biggest takeaway from AV Kyogre is you have access to clicking Thunder and Ice Beam. One of the problems I always run into when I am running a Kyogre team is how do I hit the bulky waters if I lose my Grass type, right? Like if they were to lose Serena, how do I actually hit bulky waters after that? I think having that option to have Thunder and Ice Beam, because both are so good, right? I think Ice Beam is a necessity because you want to be able to maybe swing a game in your favor on a low HP Grass type that you need to remove from the field. And I think Thunder, once again, it just allows you to hit those flying types so much harder. It makes so much sense. It allows you to hit those bulky water types as well, because if you're going to Terra Water, that's one way to wall Kyogre, right? But if you're going to Terra Water now, you don't wall the Kyogre anymore because its ability to click Thunder. And I think that is a very, very good option on a Kyogre moving forward, and we see that here, right? Other than that, I mean, the rest of the team closes out relatively normally, right? Tailwind plus Flutter Mane Urshifu, nothing too wild there. That's just a good concept of team, just not as immediate Tailwind, right? So I'd be curious to know how this matches up into something like into a Tornadus Kyogre team or a Tornadus team, because I feel like a lot of the times you're just going to end up not getting your Tailwind up in those matches. So I feel like you'd have to lean a little bit more on the bulk. But then again, an AV Kyogre, it's capable of being that bulk piece, right? So it's probably pretty strong regardless. Either way, I mean, the team is incredible. I think Jugular Kyogre is insanely cool. Serena stopping the priority going onto your team is amazing. Really, really cool team. And honestly, triple axial plus Kyogre. You click water spell, you click triple axial, 90% of the format is taking 90% damage, right? It's absolutely busted. It's a really good core. I think this is one of the coolest teams from top 8. And I say one of the coolest teams because Keanu's team coming in next, I think, was on nobody's radar. Obviously, the Zamazenta was on people's radar. People were ready for Zamazenta, right? We all had our game plans going into Zamazenta, but I don't know if anybody had a game plan for Zamazenta, Moltres Galar, and Latios, right? Zamazenta, Pelipper, Rillaboom's normal on here as well. Choice Band Rillaboom is actually kind of cool. I played a Zamazenta in Swiss, actually, and they were actually running Clear Amulet. So I think that more offensive Rillaboom on this type of team seemingly is the stronger option here, right? And obviously the Rocky Helmet Pelipper is a pretty cool cook, right? Just if you're going to try to fake me out, maybe I break a sash, maybe I get a little bit of chip damage that allows me to get a Hurricane to kill later on, right? Really, really cool piece. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know what's going on between the Latios and the Moltres. Zamazenta, I know for sure, does not appreciate Moltres. Does not appreciate Calyrex Shadow. So Moltres is there, and Moltres obviously does appreciate Calyrex Shadow. Obviously not as well as it used to, because those Calyrexes can still Terra Fairy. However, if the Calyrex decides to Terra Fairy, now you have your Steel type, now you click Heavy Slam, and down it goes. Right? So I think the team is really, really well built. I'm very intrigued by the fact that they have Wide Guard and not Iron Defense on this Zamazenta. So I'm curious to see how they were approaching their matchups where, you're generally thinking Zamazenta. Once again, similar to that Terrapagos, you'd think it as it wants to be that piece that's going to click Iron Defense and set up. And it's going to take that extra 1 or 2 turns to try and set up. If you can stall that out, it's awesome. And you know what I mean? Like the Terrapagos, right? You're expecting your game plan going into it to be them wanting to set up those Iron Defenses. You're expecting it to try and set up. And then all of a sudden it doesn't set up. And it goes on the offense immediately. I think there's something to be said about that, and I think that's what you're seeing here, because a lot of these teams, like, it's literally just offense, right? The team is very, very cool. I'm not going to try and break it down, because if I tried to break it down, I think I would be very wrong in what I think the concepts of this team were. I can get some general ideas, but the team is very, very cool, right? But once again, you're seeing it. Massive offense with Miraidon, massive offense with Terrapagos, right? The two balanced teams that kind of withstood the test of time. Massive offense. Kyogre go Burr, right? Tailwind, Jugulus, Urshifu, right? Kyogre Water Spout is not a balanced team, but that was played very balancedly, but it's still a very offensive variant, right? Then, of course, you've got more offensive again. A little bit bulkier on that side, right? But just an aggressive version that we just went over. And Aaron Trailer, of course, once again, rocking that Miraidon, and that is beside a Ditto. I'm going to go into the team really, really quickly here. But Farigiraf, once again, rocking that Electric Seed. I must have missed, like, the text message that everybody got that said, hey, Electric Seed Farigiraf is goated. I must have missed that. So, here we are. Anyways, Electric Seed Farigiraf beside Miraidon. And Blood Moon, very similar to Rajan's team as well, with that Whimsicott there as well. Right? And the Ditto is really the only thing that's kind of different here. And that's the one thing I want to touch upon, because Ditto in a restricted format is like having a second restricted. Is like having a half a restricted waiting if you can get the slot to switch in properly. Now, you can do some cool things, right? You can switch into an opposing Incineroar and put an Intimidate up. You can switch into an opposing Zacian and get the +2 because of the Behemoth, you get the Intrepid Sword ability to proc again, right? You can copy the Calyrex Shadow, probably one of the bigger usage for Ditto, right? Maybe you copy their Kyogre. Now you have a Scarf Kyogre to put Water Spout out, right? Ditto in restricted formats is always and historically has been amazing. Now, I don't know its validity in this format right now. It feels a little weird with Terra, because normally you'd switch it in, you'd get the Calyrex Shadow, right? You'd be faster than it, and you'd just Astral Barrage, it would be gone. However, now, even if you are faster than it, they can potentially Terra out of your Astral Barrage that you're clicking into them. They don't die. They Astral Barrage you back. You die, right? So obviously takes, I think, a little bit more skill and positioning to try and make sure that it's in that right spot. But Ditto is a very, very cool addition to this team. And once again, very similar to the winning team on Rajan's side. Just an absolutely offensive powerhouse from Blood Moon and Miraidon. And once again, all stream, we saw Miraidon, Blood Moon, just Miraidon especially, just I don't care that you resist this attack. You are taking 1,000,000. And the Volt Switch being able to reposition is absolutely phenomenal. We'll take a quick look at some of the top 16 teams here. We won't go into each of them. We'll just take a quick glance. Now, this is where the Calyrex Ice showed up, eh? This is where the Calyrex Ice showed up. Right? Once again, those Calyrex Ice teams that we were kind of expecting here in 10th and 11th from Jody and Junksy, right? And then Artan's team is actually really, really cool. Something that I don't think was on a lot of people's radars. But that is just a dedicated Trick Room team here, where you've got that Smeargle and the Farigiraf. You're going to try to find a ways to get Trick Room up. I believe the Smeargle also had Decorate, which is insane beside Calyrex Ice. If you are letting Smeargle get Trick Room up and you are letting Smeargle click Decorate onto the Calyrex Ice, I'm pretty confident the game is just over at that point if that happens. Right? Then you have the big special side offense in the Farigiraf Blood Moon that is nothing new, and I believe this is a pretty slow Wicked Blow, so Dark Urshifu as well. Let me just double check. Obviously, I'm not going to get the speed stat here, but it is indeed a choice banded Dark Urshifu, right? Just really, really cool team here from Artan, right? Different take on those, on the the Calyrex Ice Trick Room stuff, right? Like I said, once again, those next two teams that you see here, this is what we were expecting from Cali Ice, and this is more of a different variant of it, which I think is really, really cool to see. Then we get Jonathan's team here, the highest placing Groudon in 12th. Everybody said Groudon was fake. Everybody said Groudon was worse than Koraidon, yet it finished higher. Now, granted, both with a top 16 finish, both getting 80 CP is pretty similar build, right? This is obviously just coming down to resistance and opponents' tiebreakers and stuff like that. But Groudon is very cool. Very similar Groudon team to kind of what I was on at the start of the format, right? With the Amoonguss, the Incin, the Fluttermane, the Raging Bolt, right? I think Ogerpon Hearthflame is very, very good beside Groudon as well. Just an immediate threat, always, right? Get rid of those water types, and now you're in the sun more often than not, and your Ivy Cudgels are doing disgusting amounts of damage. Very, very strong team, very, very cool team. And maybe Groudon, yes, still is on fraud watch, but it's doing something. And I think that's enough to be talking about it. Once again, pretty similar to the rest of the Cali Ice teams that we've been seeing here. Nothing too crazy here. And then obviously Lucas' team with the Koraidon, highest placing Koraidon that I do want to talk about. And, you know, it's just a Koraidon team. This is Koraidon balance. It's a very cool take on it, though, because a lot of the times we're not seeing Ogerpon Water Shenpao, right? You're normally seeing like an Amoonguss or a Rillaboom in that grass slot. And honestly, I don't think I've seen a Koraidon team or too many Koraidon teams with a Shenpao there either, right? You normally see like the Giraffe or something per priority. But Lucas' team is very, very cool here, right? Different little spin on the Koraidon. Obviously, it was the correct spin on Koraidon, given that it is the highest placing Koraidon in the format, right? Then, of course, you got another Kyogre Serena in Stefan here. And once again, another Terapagos. I am very curious if this is once again another Specs Terapagos. I am going to go ahead and check. It's actually Power Herb. But once again, the more offensive form of Terapagos, right? Just getting that Meteor Beam. Going to get the +1 a little bit differently rather than a common. I'm going to get the +1 by removing a piece on the field on your side of the board. And then I'm going to Terra, right? It feels really strong. I think it's a very cool concept as well. Just as we see all these top placing Terapagos teams, they're just trying something different, right? They're going for that different approach. Everybody coming into the tournament, like I said before, and I'm sounding like a broken record, everybody was going along the lines of, hey, it's going to be slow. We got to expect this thing to be slow. It's going to set up, but all of a sudden you just put Terapagos on the board and it just starts dishing offense immediately. Very, very tough. I'm going to scroll all the way down now. We're going to start looking at some usage stats. I really want to just focus on the restricted Pokemon here. So we're going to take a look at the day 1, day 2 restricteds. We saw Calyrex Shadow be 18% usage in day 1, 16% in day 2. Pretty on point. They didn't perform as well in day 2, But I don't think this makes Calyrex Shadow a bad Pokemon. I think Calyrex Shadow was just heavily prepared for going into the tournament, right? So yes, there were a lot of them in the tournament, but yes, there was also enough players ready to cover these Calyrex Shadow teams that were expecting to come up. Similarly, with the Calyrex Ice, once again, an 18% usage in day one, jumping all the way up to a 32%, so had a very good conversion rate, very, very strong cut rate from Calyrex Ice as well. Just really, really good things going around with this Calyrex, you know, and it did a lot. Didn't quite win the tournament, but there were a lot of them. I think there were 7 in top 16. I could be wrong. And that is a very good showing, right? The top restricted isn't always going to win the tour, but the top restricted definitely showed up here, in my opinion. And once again, you see both of these. They're going to be the top restricted for the format, right? Just what we see here is probably a very good indication of how we're going to see it. Obviously, some will interchange, some will go up, some will go down, but this is what you're seeing, right? You actually get to see that the same 8 Pokemon or the same 8 restricteds make up this list, right? There wasn't a different restricted that snuck on. It is these 8 Pokemon, right? Obviously down a little bit in usage stats on the Groudon in 3%, but it's still on there, right? And no other restricted had passed it, right? Kyogre sticking around 11%. Miraidon, once again, I was surprised to see Miraidon up this high. Now, I don't know if Miraidon up this high on day one was just because a lot of the times it was just one of the easier restricteds to obtain in game, right? So maybe that may inflate the number, but obviously, we saw the Miraidon win the tour, right? So very clearly, Miraidon is a good Pokemon, right? Terapagos went from 9 to 14%. It converted really, really well as well. Zamazenta, about what we'd expect, kind of 6%, sat around there a lot, right? So this is, if you're looking to plan out some restricted matchups, these are the 8 matchups I would really, really look into. I think these are pretty much, I think, not surprising, right? We saw a lot of tier lists. You know, this was Calyrex Shadow number 1, Calyrex Ice number 2. Kyogre actually kind of did surprise me being top 4 in usage along with Miraidon. I think those two were the biggest surprises in usage, right? I feel like we'd see Miraidon, just I didn't think it would be this high into usage under restricted charts, right? And Terapagos, everybody had those rated high. Koraidon, people had that rated high, right? Zamazenta, right? There's not really too many surprising factors. I think the most surprising one is actually the Groudon on this list, or the Miraidon, right? Just people expecting certain things, and I think for the most part, a lot of these tier lists that I have seen, including my own, got them for the most part right. Obviously, we're going to be wrong. I was very wrong on Miraidon. That's my Miraidon apology right there. Regardless, though, here's back to the top 8 one more time. Not going to talk about it anymore. I've kind of rambled on long enough. Thank you all so much for watching. If you guys do enjoy these types of videos, please feel free to leave a like and subscribe. It really does help out the channel. And of course, I really do appreciate it. But with that, I'm going to get on out of here. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you all in a future video.